Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life. Not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter at vmspod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/vmspod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/vmspod and patronize me. Now, for those of you who try and glean anything about my non-podcast life out of these intros, I'll give you a minor update. Nothing too revealing because of the aforementioned non-disclosure agreements in my life, but the big week I was expecting last week did not come off as planned, so maybe there's another big week ahead. We'll see. I've given up on predicting anything at this point. With that out of the way, let's roll into the new episode. My guest this time around is Andrea Tsurumi. She's a cartoonist with her first book out called Why Would You Do That? From Hick and Hawk Publications. It is a collection of short and longish comics that are alternately surreal, naturalistic, absurd, everything in between. There's a whole ton of different styles and influences that Andrea breaks out here, a really fractured sense of humor, which is why I figured we would make for a fun conversation, as well as some genuine human feeling. The final story in the collection is longer than the rest, and not in the straight humorous vibe or weird formal craziness that she employs elsewhere in the volume. This stuff's right up my alley. I really enjoyed it, and as I'll talk about a couple of times during this episode, I have a bit of a blind spot about younger artists, and just because of my life and sort of the amount of things I can dedicate time to, when it comes to comics, I tend to focus on the guys who were around when I was in my prime comics reading age. Klaus, Hernandez brothers, Chris Ware, etc. So it's great discovering somebody younger who's really, really good. I'm also fascinated because while I was doing research on Andrea, there's a lot that goes into the work, art, life balancing act. It's something she's very thoughtful about in terms of having a job that actually pays enough that she can work on the comics but isn't so demanding that she can't develop her art. So the thing is, in that era that I was talking about earlier, cartoonists could legitimately make a go of things, make a living, I guess, as indie cartoonists. And that's really not the case now. So I'm interested in how younger cartoonists see the art in terms of making it a career, or at least having an understanding of what it takes to make a living and make art at the same time. And Andrea's really cognizant of that stuff and made for a really fun conversation. There are a couple of caveats. One, there was a big air conditioning unit right next to us. I filtered that out, but it causes our audio to sound a little modulated and weird. I'm good with the noise removal, but not super audio producer level. So anyway, you got that. The other caveat, I talked a lot. This one was recorded immediately after my Arthur Lubau episode last week about the Deanne Arbus biography. Basically, I hustled from his place over to the site where we were recording, and it was a little tough for me to switch gears. She and Arthur are very different people, and I was kind of, I did a lot of talking, like I said, which is not what you guys are tuning in for necessarily, but Andrea really played off of that. I think it makes for a fun conversation over the next hour or so. Now, about the place we recorded, we did this one at the School of Visual Arts, or SVA. I've done a few episodes there over the years, one with Nathan Fox and Sheila Keenan, another with Virginia Postrel. because we needed a place to record, and Andrea was coming from out of town, as am I hit up Nathan, who is the chair of the MFA Visual Narrative Department, to see if there was any space we could use, and it turned out they were able to accommodate us. And it also turns out that Andrea is teaching at SVA. She just said she was going to be in Chelsea teaching, and I didn't realize it was basically across the street from the place I was trying to find a location. So that worked out wonderfully. But I do want to praise SVA and talk about Nathan's program a little bit. SVA offers a low residency MFA program in visual narrative with 2 years online and 3 summers in New York City. The program focuses on, well, according to their site, the growing need for original content creators in advertising, video games, picture books, graphic novels, film, comic arts, illustration, and animation, and prepares artists and authors to become innovators in the ever-evolving art of visual storytelling. Given my predilection for comics, but the fact that I'm unwilling to actually ever engage in drawing anything, this is like the next best thing, knowing that this is close by. For information about the program, visit sva.edu and search for visual narrative. It looks like they're also going to give me a space for next week's guest, which I'll tell you about at the end of the show. Now here's Andrea's bio from her website. Andrea Tsurumi is an illustrator and cartoonist who likes history, absurdity, dogs, and monsters, in no particular order. Her first book, Why Would You Do That?, is out now from Hick and Hawk Publishing. A lifelong book nerd, she received an English BA from Harvard and an MFA in illustration from the School of Visual Arts. She now lives in Philadelphia and likes her ice cream angry. That'll make sense when you see the cover to Why Would You Do That? It's one ice cream cone knocking the ice cream out of another ice cream cone. Anyway, that's in keeping with the absurd sense of humor, I guess. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Andrea Tsurumi. I've had enough friends, and not a ton of them, but enough friends with addiction issues over the years that I concluded you can never really help anyone. You can try to make things easier for them, but they sort of have to make that decision on their own, I think. Yeah. But I've never been in that boat, so it's probably just me copping out on really committing to helping people. How about you?
Have I helped anyone with addiction?
Yeah.
It's not personally, but I mean, I've had some issues with codependency myself. We're really getting into it right off the bat here.
We don't have to include this part. It's okay. But.
No, it's cool. But yeah, finding out what's your business and what's their business and where that ends is so vital about growing up. And, I think maybe that's a gendered thing too, but being socialized to be there for other people and feeling only of use because of how you can help someone else is something very complicated.
Yeah.
I think that I've definitely encountered in myself and in other people. So I like getting older. I mean, when I say getting older, I'm 31, but like...
I was hoping, because I frequently tell people one of the things I've learned about myself doing the show is that I hate talking to anybody under the age of 50.
Okay.
Or at least younger than me. I always tell people it's young people they don't know. Every time I subsequently do one, they're great. But I like to at least think anybody younger than me has nothing at all. I'm 45, but anybody younger than me has nothing to say of consequence.
It's just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Soda Pop.
That's right. A bunch of superhero comics, etc. But yeah, there's also aspects of. Without being condescending, the shit you learn when you get older. Once you've seen a few cycles of this go by, there's just stuff you can't get, and there's stuff that I can't get until the 50s and 60s go by. But yeah, sitting down with like Sam Gross in his mid-80s and Pfeiffer and guys like that, and you realize,
Jules Pfeiffer.
They've seen cycle, and they've dealt with this sort of stuff in their own ways when people were less communicative about things. But we still had problems, I guess. There's actually a great part in Pfeiffer's memoir. I don't know if you've ever
Kill My Mother,
where he talks about Kill My Mother.
Oh,
it should have been the subtitle.
Backing into Forwards.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
This is the Kill My Mother part of Backing into Forwards.
Yes.
Where he's got the intense stomach pain when he's working at Eisner's studio, and one of the younger cartoonists explains to him that it's psychosomatic because he actually hates his mom. And Pfeiffer refuses to believe it as a 16 or 17-year-old. And he finally gives in and just shouts at the guy, "Fine, I hate my mother. Are you happy?" And all the pain goes away instantly.
Oh,
he realizes,
God.
oh my God, I do hate my mother. But anyway, that's a terrible place to start for a conversation. Do your parents get what you do?
Yeah, they've always been very supportive. I don't think they're not regular comics readers other than the New Yorker and newspaper comics and things like that, but they love movies and books and TV and that kind of thing. So they've been very encouraging of me doing this, even though I'm pretty sure they don't necessarily get it. I mean, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's what's nice about family, right? You can do something really out there, and they're like, "Oh, that's very nice."
Oh, mine don't get anything about this. They also don't understand my day job. So,
Really?
my father thought I graduated with a degree in marine biology from Hampshire. So, yeah, there's a degree that, you should be happy that they're at least engaged in what you're doing. So, but you have your first book.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
Also, according to Publishers Weekly, you're a rising comic star. I'm sure you've had that facial expression before. What got you started in comics?
I've always loved reading comics. I've always loved reading in general. Comics and picture books, I have to say, have been my twin loves growing up. And there was a point, I think in high school, thanks to Mr. Stephen Munkle, one of my English teachers, where I just kind of realized, I love telling stories. There's just something about stories that just matters to me and drives me, and I find endlessly interesting and meaningful and fun, that if I could be lucky enough to find a way to do this for the rest of my life, I'd be so happy. The next thoughts were then, how the fuck does someone do this? And how does someone make money? And how do you figure that out? So I went to college and studied English, and have always just been kind of studying storytelling in that way. And I'm a visual person. I've always been drawing and reading. So the interplay of text and image is something I've been studying for a while and something I love playing with. And there's something about comics and also picture books, picture books for adults, picture books for kids, that I just love the storytelling possibilities you get from working in that medium, those mediums.
Medias?
Medias.
In media res, whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, what were the comics, or what were the first ones you remember really glomming onto?
Comics. Well, what was around? So, newspapers, Calvin and Hobbes, of course. The Far Side was something I just loved. I have so many clippings that are still in my bedroom growing up by Gary Larson. I just love the wacko humor, which I think I kind of glommed onto a little bit as I went through. Tintin, because it was in the libraries. My brother and I both read that. And
so you didn't grow up in a world where there were no comics in libraries.
No.
You had to understand what an absolute friggin' wasteland it was growing up in the 70s.
Screwed you guys over.
Awful. No, I mean, it's wonderful that there's this great panoply of comics for you to enjoy it. But yeah, deep down we resent it.
It's a weird, and now is a really interesting time because if any kid is going to a library, they have a whole section. Yeah. When I was going to school and growing up, it was starting. It was starting, but it hadn't quite developed. So it was this weird interstitial time. My generation is weird too because we remember time before the internet and then after the internet. Yeah. So there's that negotiation. But I remember going. Okay, so grew up reading Calvin and Hobbes, Gary Larson, Tintin, Archie, because that was around. And I want to throw Cricket Magazine in there too. It's a kind of like a literary art journal for kids. So they have excerpts of books and stories, and there's little comics that run through it that are really clever and interesting. So I was reading all that stuff, but I never really thought of myself as somebody who was into comics per se. I just, loved reading and picture books again. And then I remember watching Batman the Animated Series when that came out in the early 90s, I want to say. Yeah. And, when you're growing up and you have these moments of dramatic realization of the obvious, and that's what the growing up is. It's wait, okay, Batman the Animated Series is over. I'm distraught. That was so good. The story, the Mr. Freeze storyline was so heartbreaking. I just wanted more of it. And that was the first time I was I could get myself to more of it. And I actually took myself, to bookstores, to Borders and Barnes & Nobles and libraries to find the Batman comics. And I found some, The Long Halloween and the Frank Miller one and other things. But those are shelved next to the indie comics. And because of that particular time of history, there were comics appearing on the shelves next to the Batman, Marvel, DC stuff, and Hellboy.
In comic form, in other words, not trade paperbacks. Yeah.
No, trade paperbacks.
No, I mean, they were there too, but you actually had comics coming out from some of these indie guys.
Yes. So that's how I found Chris Ware and Daniel Clowes. It was that moment when they started showing up in the New York Times, and It was Chris Ware, Daniel Klaus, Shutterbug Follies by Jason Little was also, I remember that just the border shelf. And then I just explored that, read so much stuff for free. I probably directly contributed to them closing. But I'm not going to take responsibility for that.
But that was always, once they started, especially carrying manga, if you went into Borders or Barnes & Noble, it was always just a group of kids sitting on the floor reading.
Yes.
And it's one of those, like, you understand they're never going to, oh, whatever, then maybe someday they'll become bookish, and, you know.
But it's cool because those kids are now like growing up and working on Steven Universe, and you can see the influence of that, you know, them digesting the manga in the art they're making. I grew up without playing video games personally because that was just our household, but you can start to see the video game influence in art. It's really fascinating. Like when people come of age, all their influences get digested and come right back out.
Yeah, see, for us, the weird thing was when the Wendy's ad started including that Violent Femmes song about beating off. That was one of those, like, wow, you were somebody who listened to this in the 80s and now you're in charge of an ad agency. That's kind of messed up, that, you know, that you would choose this of all things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll see. You know, it always gets worse, is what I'm saying. Just you know. These,
Life in general?
Yeah.
Okay. Good
you have
to
nothing
know.
to look forward to. Trust me. First book, I know, a lot of optimism, but the kids are, well, you were picking up on that sort of stuff when you were.
Yeah, so I was just reading through them, and that's how I got turned on to them. And then once I found them, I started looking for them in the libraries. And what the library had wasn't Chris Ware and Daniel Klaus. They had like one section of one shelf for comics at that time, and that was Jules Pfeiffer and Charles Adams, and
More cartooning collections as opposed to like comics.
Right. And then I kind of like went about my business, went to college, and then I saw the Hellboy movie, which was ridiculous and awesome. I love Guillermo del Toro, so. And that drove me back to the library shelf, which by then had expanded and grown like some sort of like hellacious plant, and found Hellboy, and then found Alison Bechdel and all these other comics that were coming, and then I never left. So I guess it's a miracle of juxtaposition just because it was next to the Batman comics. Because I lost kind of interest in that over time, so it was a very good thing. I transitioned. And I made friends with people who loved comics, and then we reinforced, you know, our interests, and I started taking classes, and so that kind of snowballed from there.
Who was the first adult, by which I mean grown-up, cartoonist you met?
Met?
Would it have been in school or?
Not at Harvard. Probably Tom Hart. Because he was my first comics teacher. He was teaching continuing education at SVA. And, it was after the recession. I had lost my job because the recession came and just ate my job. Yeah. So I had 6 months unemployed and didn't know what to do, and had always wanted to make art and tell stories, but had no idea how to do it. So my boyfriend, Alexander Rothman, had known Tom, so he suggested I just take a course with him. And that was like the first... Comics are great. Because they're so democratic, right? Like, the line between reading them and making them is so small.
It's pen and paper.
Right. And there's something about wanting, like, reading them and immediately being able to become part of that community by making them that is just so special and inspiring and interesting. And I don't know, something about going to that class, I felt like I showed up and people took me seriously as a cartoonist, even though I didn't know I could do it. And, you know, I was messing up and making all kinds of mistakes and things, but it was a very big, like, a big step forward in confidence and in possibility. So that, I mean, there's been a lot between that and then, but, I mean, that class too. And Tom, I'm not sure if you've met him.
We haven't met, but I read Hutch Owen's Working Hard when it first came out back in 1994, I want to say.
Yeah, it's a great comic.
We corresponded a little about getting together sometime to record one of these, but yeah, no, I go way back with his comics. So.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah.
Hutch Owen, The Sands. So I started reading his comics, and that kind of snowballed. I started reading comics like True Swamp by John Lewis and all other kinds of things. So it just exponentially spiraled outward of reading things like that. And then I started taking more classes, like with Matt Madden and Tom Motley. And there came a point where I started getting more interested in being more disciplined about it, which is when I went to grad school for that.
Yeah, so it was essentially the classes with Tom were more auditing or workshop sort of classes, but not official.
Adult continuing education.
Okay. And you actually came here for the MFA program.
6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night with Tom, and then when I went to the MFA at SVA, eventually that was 2 years full time in this very building, 2 floors above us right now. So that the elevator trip brought me back.
What was your moment? What moment did you realize you just learned something that was, holy shit, I can now make comics?
I can now make comics?
Yeah. Yeah. Like what was okay, this is the thing I was sort of not getting, but now I get.
I think when I finally finished my first story.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about pushing through and it's a slog, you know, when you're pushing through, at least for me, when you're pushing through a narrative to the end and just completing that and seeing it through, even though there are all kinds of mistakes again and all kinds of problems, that was just this big moment of, I made it. Okay. And thank God I had a certain amount of ignorance of that protected me of like how far I had to go. Because I knew that I was really happy for where I was at the moment, but I knew that I had to work very hard to get from there to anywhere else I wanted to go, but I didn't quite appreciate how much work it would take to do that. But that's the thing about an obsession, right? Or an addiction, like it just keeps you going. You keep returning to it over and over again. So,
but you're not building up a tolerance, so that's good.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
But it's one of those things that, you talk about Dave Sim, another relatively controversial comics figure who you probably haven't dived into all the way.
You know, I've been meaning to read Cerebus? Cerebus for about 6 years.
You should look at Cerebus.
Okay.
You shouldn't read Cerebus necessarily. There's a great run somewhat early on, but one of the interesting things about it is, you know, the guy did a 300-issue project. He started it as this barbarian Conan parody and then announced that he was going to do 300 issues, and this is where it goes. And he spent the next 27 or 28 years of his life doing that on a monthly basis. The early ones are terrible, and you have to slog through that early stuff because you see this guy's entire artistic career unfold in front of you. Like he's learning how to do X, Y, and Z over those maybe first 20 to 25 issues, which sounds terrible. Again, like you couldn't imagine. I just published 500 pages of stuff before I figured out what I was doing.
Right.
But that's what he did. And there was a market that could support that once upon a time, because he rapidly hits a phase from issues like 25 to 100 that are just mind-blowingly good. He may never surpass again once he gets too smart for his own good. But so what I'm saying is don't get too smart. That's really...
Okay.
Figure out what you're doing, tell stories, but don't start taking your own praise too heavily. No rising comic star. That's you know.
Which is, I guess, for Publishers Weekly is funny, right? Like, comics are still kind of new to them, maybe?
Yeah. I wasn't sure exactly, you know, how they rate that stuff, although I'm not too well versed on younger cartoonists. I glom onto the guys who I was reading just a little bit before your time, but it would have been Chris Ware, Klaus, the Hernandez brothers.
Oh, yeah. Jaime Hernandez is amazing.
Yeah. Pete Bagg also. Some guys who Seth, who I've subsequently interviewed.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a degree that, you know, just a few years difference, at least in my case, you sort of lose track and you're not sure exactly what the...
Right. Like music.
Yeah. Oh, that, I convinced myself after about 1999. I'm just, you know, I can't bother getting into a conversation about music because I'll just be, again, you'll see this as you get older.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
it's
seeing
terrible,
it now. I'm spiritually like an 80-year-old woman. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I like socks and soup and staying home. So I'm already grumpy and crotchety as it is. I'm hoping I get younger as I age. I heard that's a thing with some people.
Yeah, it could happen.
You give less of a crap, so you become less anxious and worried. So
that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Learning how to just let things go. You know,
Yeah.
not that I'm here to distribute life lessons or anything like that. That's really not what this is about, and certainly not what I'm about. But one of the things that does strike me, at least from the other articles of or interviews with you that I've read, the ability to work and to separate illustration work from cartooning, but also that sense that they sort of feed off of each other. You probably don't understand that most people don't actually have a work ethic yet, or maybe you've hit upon that. Most people just kind of slog off and complain about stuff. So what technique or strategies do you have for achieving that sense of balance, I guess, as much as you might be said to have any sense of balance?
like work-life balance?
Yeah. Work, art, and life. Those are three separate things.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, see, that's the toughie. Work and life are two things, but to make the time to actually make art also, and I'll probably cut all this part out because I'm rambling incessantly.
Nah, everybody wants to know this. I want to know this, yeah.
But, you know, what was did you have a certain sense of, holy crap, I've only got X number of hours in a day? Or did you have the Joyce Carol Oates, recognition that you might die any minute and you just have to keep working?
Is there a comics artist alive who doesn't think about their death all the time? I kind of wonder that.
I think they spend too much time staring at a page, just huddled over. That's probably.
So they don't look up and look at death, which is
or
always
they're
there.
afraid that, nobody's going to find them for the first day or two after.
Like Diane Arbus,
Yeah.
circled back around. Oh
Yeah.
God, that's horrible. I'm sorry.
It's fine. The macabre is good. That's.
Yeah, I can't believe she wrote The Last Supper before she took all those pills. That's
The other thing that comes up in the book that I asked the guy I interviewed, and his interview will air the week before yours. 2 or 3 pages of her appointment book were razored out after that instance.
okay.
He alludes to it, but doesn't extrapolate as to what, or speculate onto what was there. But
Oh man.
yeah, I asked him off mic about it because I also didn't want to go into anything salacious during the interview. But yeah, it's Last Supper, and then 2 or 3 pages of the appointment book are missing, and yeah.
God. Wow.
Yeah.
Sends chills up your spine.
But yeah, she's a really awesome story. Not one that you should follow up on too
Oh,
closely, though,
thank you.
because the death by 48 years old is not good. So
Not you wouldn't recommend it. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. Work life art balance. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been an overachiever as long as I can remember. I'm a big nerd. So I don't know. I mean, I don't have an answer. I just, like everybody else, I'm just doing the best that I can with what I have. And the only thing that I've learned going forward, and talking with other people who are doing it too, is the importance of being self-aware about how you spend your time and your effort, and looking up from your slog or your chaos every once in a while and being like, what's happening? Where am I going? How does this work? The problem with freelance illustration and comics is just that there's not enough money. Like especially if you're living in New York City, where I was after I graduated college. So, and if you don't have enough money, you don't have enough time. And if you don't have enough money or time, you have to make hard choices, and you'll never have enough wiggle room to have a completely healthy balance. I mean, the short answer is like, how do you have time for all three? Is like, have money, or find money, or find a way to make money so that you have more time. But yeah, that's an easy answer, right? I think when I graduated from the MFA program, I was just trying to do as much as I could, because I was new and I was trying to figure things out, and I really wanted to build my career. And then over time, as I've built up my career and built up jobs and things, and gotten just more tired, honestly, I've said no to more things, or I've been more selective about things, and more intentional about, like, okay, I want to start a project, I want to Kickstarter this. Not that I've done that, but I want to see these things happen. And I think I went back and looked at my Google Calendar, my GCal, from 2013, and I looked at it from 2011, and I was just nuts. Like, I had a note saying, like, ink 8 pages in one day. It's like, well, and of course I never did that, but I was just stressed out all the time. And now I have a better, more healthy acceptance of what I can and cannot do. And I remember I was in Matt Madden and Tom Hart's class, and Jessica Abel came in to talk about scheduling. Mm-hmm. And she's doing this a lot now on her blog.
Yeah, I noticed she's got I don't want to say guru thing, but she's teaching people in terms of how to make time for art, I guess.
Yes,
yeah.
And one of the things she said is have a business plan, and that's something that definitely matters. But making time to take time off, I never thought about that. I mean, it seemed to go so far against the work ethic of you must work all the time kind of thing. I
haven't taken a vacation since 2003, so...
Seriously?
Yeah, I've until last August, when my wife and I went away to Chicago for about 4 or 5 days, I had not taken a trip that didn't involve work or the rest of my family since 2003.
Why?
Because I'm insane. Not that you're alone with me in a strange room or anything. No, I just couldn't stop. Which even now, I'm engaged in this gigantic project, and the association that I represent, the members have said, Gil, when this is done, you need to stop and just go away for a week and not respond to emails and just chill the hell out, because we get that this is insane, which is kind of nice, I guess. But now I'm my own boss, so I really get much more strict with this slacker employee of mine. I'm just kidding.
So you're just going to be in the air vents, right?
Yeah, I'll just hide away, and that's it. And I'm still here.
I guess your vacations is going to be another project you assign yourself in Hawaii or something, right?
Yeah, well, part of the thing is, now it's I'm going away. Maybe if I'll take the microphones with me, I can get a show in while I'm out there. And that's still working, kind of, and I need to learn how not to do that. But the plus side is I have more hours in the day than the rest of you, so, I can get more done, I think.
Yeah, you got to use whatever advantages you have. And, I've neglected the importance of staying healthy for a really long time.
Did you have health problems or just a general shitty diet and all that? Or?
Yeah, the shitty diet, the no sleep. I think I just moved to Philadelphia with my boyfriend. And I think this is the first time I've been able to sleep 8 hours regularly in 10 years, 12 years or so. So, like, in addition to doing the comics, I've been working in publishing. So I had like a 9 to 5. Yeah. More recently, I had a part-time job that's 9 to 5-ish, and then doing freelance. So it would be working, commuting home, and then working for another 4 hours, ordering in because you don't have time to shop or cook, not exercising, and that takes a huge toll. It's not being unhealthy doesn't help me make good art. It just makes me miserable and tired and get those wonderful circles under your eyes. Mm-hmm. And it's not worth it to me. I mean, I could devote everything to it, to making art and to work. And I don't think that's a good life for me. I really want to pay attention to the people who are in my life, and I really want a dog, and I really want to experience nature while I'm still breathing. So why not do that?
I still recommend a greyhound. Get a greyhound. They're couch potatoes. I have no idea how big your apartment is. So
we have unfortunately a 20-pound limit on our lease, so it will be. They have mini greyhounds, though, right?
Italian greyhounds. Okay. Little itty bitty tiny ones.
Okay.
We had a dog park once, and one of them just literally walked under my greyhound's legs like it was a cricket, or a wicket.
Have you thought about getting a miniature one? So you have like the big version and the small version?
We've joked about it, but we think the big one would just be tired out by the little one, having too much energy. But that's sort of the way the whole aging thing works. You'll see. Not that I'm supposed to be the specter of death during it this whole time.
Repent. Yeah.
You'll see.
Oh no.
Is there a period of cartooning you wish you would come up in? One in which you have peers now, but are there guys you wish? Holy crap! I wish I was doing comics back in this period or that period.
That's a complicated question for me, I guess. I mean, there are people I wish I met. Mm-hmm. And there are places now, like I really wish I spoke French and I understood, and I was like part of the French comics movement because Louis Trondheim and John Sfire are my idols, and I would, I'd love to meet these people and work with them. But honestly, like it's like the time travel question. I mean, I'm a half Japanese Jewish woman who wants to make comics. Like now is a good time compared to.
That was the flip side of it. Yeah, that if you weren't going to actually die of that's it.
Or just I wouldn't want to be fighting that bullshit in the 1950s, and I wouldn't want to be dealing with it in the 1920s either. And
how much do you have to deal with it now? And I hate asking me, what's it like being a female cartoonist? It's the best possible time to be one, but are there what sort of hassles do you still have to deal with in that respect?
I'm not necessarily a good person to ask about this personally. I mean, I can only just talk about my own experience.
Yeah.
I
it's
don't
not like when
know.
I asked Posey Simmons what it's like being a lady cartunist, but she
I
took
didn't
it
hear
well.
that.
Oh, it's a good one.
You also asked Glennis Fox? No, you asked Jennifer Hayden and Summer Pierre that. And I agree with their response of like I don't like being seen as on one hand I don't like being seen as like I am an ex-cartoonist, and on the other hand like I understand like there's real issues with that. Like sexism is not a fake thing in comics; it's a real thing. It's a real thing in any industry in our society in general.
But not something you're encountering particularly that you feel?
Well, I have never had like some of the experiences that have been reported on of somebody like hitting on you or making your success contingent on you visiting their hotel room or any of that. I mean, I've had inappropriate things said to me at cons, but I don't go to cons very often, and the cons I go to are like Small Press Expo, Omoka, TCAF, and those are way more friendly and open to, or at least that seems that way, to women and genderqueer people and people of color than, say, I would imagine, let's say, San Diego or New York Comic-Con?
We'll just say,
I don't know. I've been to New York Comic-Con, never San Diego.
Don't. Well, I went to last time I went to San Diego was 2005, just as it was on the cusp of becoming like media. Oh. It was already bad, but not super bad. But the joke was, it was San Diego, and a pal of mine who's in the Navy was putting me up while I was there. I brought him the last day of the show, and what you need to understand is he was part of a battle group, and he was in charge of the Aegis defense system for the whole thing during the Gulf War, the second one. So he was in charge of tracking like 8 million different blips and figuring out what was friendly, what was enemy, what was neutral. During the first really chaotic days of the invasion, and he was completely overwhelmed. He walked through SDCC just looking around like, I can't understand what I'm seeing. I'm like, Ian, you were able to handle an entire Aegis system on a battle group, and it was the cosplay, the spectacle, too much for him.
So San Diego Comic-Con worse than Desert Storm.
Yeah, and that was 10 years ago. Nowadays, I think it's just over the top, beyond insane. So.
I mean, it's a question of like, how does sexism affect me in a larger society? Like, the fact that I make less per dollar, compared to somebody who's male.
Oh yeah, you only get 40 minutes today instead of the full hour.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, and any expectation for me, should I ever want to have a family, how the economics of how I support myself and my work and the time that I have, versus how much is maybe expected of me for caring for possible kids or elderly relatives or the house or things like that. I mean, or how seriously I am taken, or how much harder I have to work to just get to the same level as somebody, like how much harder I have to kick and tread water to just float the way that some other people might be, is absolutely a real thing, and something I'm encountering, but I don't have like a specific, like someone threw something at my head experience yet. I mean, again, I'm 31, so.
Look forward.
Yes, yes.
There's always Twitter. You can always be attacked.
I'm so scared of that.
As you should.
Yeah. Who wants to be swatted,
The woman from Ghostbusters, Leslie Jones, just quit today.
She quit Twitter?
Yeah, because apparently the insane level of racist crap she had to put up with.
That's disgraceful.
Yesterday just went so over the top. It was, I'm done. Don't need to do it. Which is just kind of mind-blowing. Exerting my white male privilege, blah, blah, blah. It's still...
Oh, poor lady.
Absolutely nuts. My wife and I went to that movie... See, I was exerting my heterosexuality too. My wife and I went to that movie this weekend just to. At first, I was like, I just want to support this. The very fact that it exists. So I'll give them my money just in case. And turned out to be, a blast and fun to watch. I don't go out to the movies.
Good.
So,
I've been looking forward to seeing it, but I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
It's fun.
Yeah.
My very first date when I was 13 years old was Ghostbusters.
Not bad.
Yeah. Denise Kubiak, that lousy. No, Denise and I went to Ghostbusters.
Oh, good.
It was my very first date, and I did not feel as though my entire childhood had been devalued by the fact that there were 4 women in Ghostbusters now instead of men.
Well, you're seeing pushback, right? I mean, whenever you're starting to push on the bubble of privilege or power or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why you're seeing all these like flare-ups right now. Like it comes raining back down on you.
Obama said it 8 years ago. Bibles and guns. These guys are going to feel more threatened, and the more they feel the country's slipping away, the more they're going to reach for Bibles and guns, which people knocked him for at the time. But in fact, he was.
Change is scary.
Dead on the money.
Change is scary, and the American empire is declining. So.
Yeah. I'm down.
Our workforce is different. We have more robots than ever. Some of those jobs are never coming back. I mean, what are we going to do? The future is scary. So everything gets worse from here on out, is what you're saying.
Essentially, this is the most apocalyptic episode I've ever done. This is tremendous.
See, I love it because I love doing funny stuff. But and people who know me know that I can bring people down.
Yes, I'm so glad we have each other. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're worried about Cartoon Bot 3000 taking over for your work?
No. I mean, I saw Joe Quesada, the guy from Marvel.
I don't really know the mainstream that well. So.
Joe from Marvel.
Yeah, Joe.
Was giving a talk in Bryant Park, and he said he always thought his comics is too small to fail.
Yeah, there's a degree of the idea that like one of those mainstream Marvel movies makes more than the entire industry has made over the last 30 years in comic form.
Right. Or so I'm not worried that I will be prevented from working in this medium. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Yeah, it would be creepy if a robot started doing what I did. I mean, as if it started doing what you did, if it started
lobbying. Yeah.
Could they automate lobbying?
I like to think not. And that's why I took the job, basically. I was editing trade magazines and decided, this whole financial model is going to disappear. I better find something that I can do that'll keep going. And that's how I turned into a soulless monster. But anyway, you can do a comic about that sometime.
Yeah.
Kill soul. It's just this. You can do a little flip book thing with it. The soul just vanishing out of me. That's like you have the one in the pooling and the woman.
Burning and yeah. Oh, that woman might not be still alive. When I was growing up, there's a woman who would just hardcore tan. She'd always come, and I didn't ever know who she was, but she was the color of a wallet. And she actually brought. No one did this when I was growing up because we'd all heard about skin cancer and all this. But she brought out that little mirror. Yeah. The 3-piece thing.
The reflector, so she could get the underside of her nose.
Oh, is that why? I always kind of wondered. So it's like under your chin and all this stuff.
I'm going to make a Gil Kane joke, but I don't know if you're going to... You know Gil Kane, the cartoon? Oh, Gil Kane was a great cartoonist from 60s, 70s, actually 50s beyond. Gil with one L. Did Spider-Man in the 70s. One of Gil Kane's things, what I didn't dig about him when I was young, but subsequently I've learned to enjoy a lot of his style of cartooning. But one thing that always got me was that almost every page there would be a shot looking up at somebody's nostrils.
Because he figured out how to draw that and was really
proud of it?
One would
have to assume that was it. It was like a story from Howard Chaykin once. He had a guy who was drawing Westerns, but he couldn't draw horses. So basically 2 guys would be pointing off panel, look, here he comes on his horse. And the next panel will be the guy walking through. Like that,
Yes.
You find ways around
Just
it.
Just lampshading it. Nice.
Yeah. What do you need to learn?
What do I...
Yeah.
I mean, well, this is a collection of short comics. I would like to make longer ones.
Yeah. You finished with a longer... was it 15, 20 pages or so, or maybe a little bit shorter?
Yeah. That's the newest piece, and it's also like one of the more personal pieces that I've done too. Yeah. So developing that kind of a voice, just becoming more assertive with my narrative. I really want to do more like comics journalism, reportage, essay writing, because I enjoy that quite a bit. I've done some of it, and right now I'm working on a children's book. So when I have more, and teaching, so when I have more time in September, I would like to get back to that. And the weirdness, too.
What sort of subject matter would you want to report on?
Probably... Well, I just moved to Philadelphia, and I would love to get more involved with local events and local folks, so...
Especially because the local press down there has been swallowed up.
City paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. I had just... Locust Moon had just started coordinating a bunch of cartoonists to do comics for them, and then it just completely... right away. Diversion.
No, but again, what local
world
down there you'd be interested in?
I don't know. There's a lot of history down there. There's a lot of history that's being made down there. There's a lot of interesting people. I especially would love to like just do a lot of interviews and meet with people one-on-one. History is another one of my interests, so delving into that and kind of developing that would be fun too. And
what periods?
19th century nerd. In a big way. Also 20th century. And because I grew up watching way too much BBC, I know way more about the British royal family than I really need to. But it's an interesting period. What periods? I don't know. I mean, my interests piggyback, they leapfrog from thing to thing to thing. So the Civil War I find really interesting. It's a fascinating moment when, the American idea of death changed and the idea of war changed. And I love learning about that, and I love learning about little things about how Gardner's photographs were staged. He was one of the main Civil War photographers, and he was like, well, I got to the battle, 2 days too late, so everything's just kind of
lie around and
and like, how do I tell? I mean, it's a storytelling problem. It's like, how do I get people interested in this? And you're like, well, there's that corpse over there is kind of ballooning up. Let's drag that rifle over here and like lay it next to him. So he's like, now he's a sharpshooter. And there was some scholar in the 70s who noticed the same rifle kept showing up over and over again, and the same person kept he was just dragging bodies around, posing them, which is not okay at all.
But at the time, it's all about journalism or ethics and journalism. I'm just kidding. It's gonna be a Gamergate joke. But there wasn't an ethical framework for this stuff. Photography was new enough that it wasn't a
right.
There wasn't a journalistic thing tied to it.
So it's idiosyncratic interest, basically. So, but I don't know, like, as you asked me what happened in the Battle of Antietam, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume it was horrible, but, like, I don't know the
Otherwise,
difference
we wouldn't be
between...
talking about it.
Right. I don't know my, like, Shiloh, Antietam, and all that, but it's more like my interest will skip around from moment to moment, depending on which aspect of it appeals to me.
Check out the conversation I did with Harry Katz a couple of weeks ago. He was a former curator for the Library of Congress for the Prints and Photos Division. He talks quite a bit about the ephemera of the Civil War and the illustrators as opposed to the photographers, basically why he disagrees with Ken Burns.
Really?
Which is just in terms of using photography solely as a way of chronicling the war when there were so many other visual sources to go with. It's a pretty fun conversation.
I'll check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, then we get to 9/11, and it's really a downer from there. But, yeah.
Have you ever seen the Illustrated Police News?
No.
It was I don't know how I found it, but it was as if, like, TMZ used illustrations instead of photos. Or if the Weekly World News was using illustrations instead of photos, because it didn't have photos. So there's all these beautiful, fully illustrated, sensational tabloids. It's like, man eaten by cats, or woman dueling with pistols, and it's so over the top. And the Jack the Ripper one is also over the top. But because it's illustrated, it's really, there's something about it that's just really funny and weird. Yeah. It gets right, or there's like these two little, it's a Victorian time, so these two little Victorian boys, and then there's like a skeleton falling out of a closet on them, because they have to get the point across. Yeah. Then there's no illusion that this is as it happened, but just over the top illustration.
And you had a strip sort of along those lines in Why Would You Do That? The children's book.
Oh, Peep of Day. Yeah, she was interesting.
Yeah, tell me about that. How did you discover that? Why did you?
So I had a friend, Margaret Maloney, who worked for Bloomsbury, and she gave me a book that they had just put out called The Clumsiest People in Europe. It's by that woman, Falva Lee Mortimer, and edited by Todd Pruzan, and it's her, I forget what the tagline is, like the cantankerous guide to places she never visited. So she wrote a travel guide without leaving Scotland or leaving England ever. And it's all like, the people in Austria are all extremely rude, and they leave their windows open all day so they can yell at people with clearer voices, and you don't want to know what's happening in Africa and China and European countries, but and it was hilarious. And then in the notes, he said that she'd also written The Peep of Day, the most sadistic children's book ever written, something like that. So I looked it up. It's on Google Books.
I gotta get that.
Yeah, well, I read that. It's mostly Jesus stories, but the introduction and these little bits that I serialized in it are like the little nuggets of extra special sadism that because a lot of those books were very focused on death and focused on, if you're bad, you will go to hell. And so she's not unusual in that way, but she's unusual in the way that she's just kind of wackadoo about it. Like, she doesn't just say, like, if you're bad, you'll die. She says all the different ways you could possibly die. Like if a knife were to run through you, your blood would run out. And if a great stone were to be dropped upon you, your head would be, it's like, lady, okay. You can, and she never had kids. She might have had a frustrated relationship with a religious person she was involved with. She had pets that she killed accidentally in terrible ways. Like, she tried to bathe her parrot, and then she was drying it by the fire, and I think it died. I don't know, but she was a piece of work. But what's crazy is it was a bestseller at the time. Like, it was translated into many languages. It sold thousands of copies, and it's.
And you said, I've got to bring this back, and
it was just so special. It was so special.
Yeah, what do you find funny? Which is a way of asking who your comedic influences are as opposed to your comic influences.
Oh, that's interesting. What do I find funny? Well, I find human behavior just endlessly fascinating. And somebody said this better than I am right now, but the gulf between what people think they're doing, what they're actually doing, is just endlessly interesting. Yeah. So observational humor I find pretty cool. Parody stuff, unsurprisingly, if you look at the book, like Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, or, again, I grew up on a lot of British humor, so Spaced, or, God, what else? Watched a lot of Richard Pryor, and Patton Oswalt stand-up. Now I'm just trying to dig in here. What else? I mean, like David Sedaris, humorism. Mark Twain, if we're really going far back. Yeah. Did a whole project on him in college, which was really fun. satire like Ronald Searle. God, I have these written down somewhere. I'm trying to figure that out.
People keep bombarding you with that question.
No.
Or just, how did I end up like this? That's,
No, it's an interesting question. I mean, people talk about humor. They don't talk about specific. I've never talked about like specific people that I enjoy, but I mean like Parks and Recreation and Amy Poehler and probably this new Ghostbusters movie. I find very.
You're not
very
a
interesting.
UCB performer or anything, right?
No.
Okay.
My friend is, and Tom Hart had recommended improv classes for people taking comics classes as a good way to learn how to storytell.
It helped Michael Kupperman.
Really?
I think. Well, he's a UCB guy, and he seemed to say that kind of enabled him to perform more loosely. But I go with the line that Eugene Merman used in an episode of Bob's Burgers, that the only true victims in improv are the audience.
Oh, Bob's Burgers, yeah. I especially love like surrealist, absurdist humor. And parody, I guess, if that narrows it down a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I've always been too chicken to do improv, honestly.
Yeah. Did you have a performative vibe at all? Or?
No, I have a performative adjacent vibe.
Yeah.
I did tech theater in college specifically because I wanted to be doing creative stuff, but with other people, but not to the extent of on stage.
Have you done one of Bob Sikoriak's carousel events?
Yeah, those are excellent. Yeah, he has a performative vibe. He and Kryota both.
Yeah.
Have you seen the kind of active paintings they make?
No.
Oh, those are fun.
Yeah. But have you ever participated in one of his
The
his
carousels?
events?
Yeah, several times. I think he has another one coming up at the Brooklyn Book Festival.
Yeah. I just figured that could get you out in front of people and semi sort of performing comics.
Yeah. And if I do children's books, I'm going to be reading to actual children, so that'll be interesting.
Tell me about can you tell me anything about the children's book you're working on?
Yeah, it's a picture book with Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and it's called Accident! Exclamation point, and it's coming out sometime in 2017. I'm finishing it right now, but. So that is also, oh God, how do I forget? Yeah, the humor in children's books. There's endless amounts of humor in children's books.
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Scarry, the dry humor of Edward Gorey, right? So it's a book about an armadillo named Lola who knocks over a jug and just sets off like a crazy chain of calamities. And it's about messing up and making it better.
It's a pretty good life lesson.
Yeah. But there's a lot of chaos and craziness along the way.
Is there anxiety? I like anxiety, as you can probably tell.
Anxiety, yeah, we all. The anxiety runs strong among the artists.
Yeah, you find.
And the nerds, yes.
Artist you freaked out around?
Freaked out around? Like lost my shit?
Yeah, somebody you got to meet and you just.
I think I might have. My voice definitely went in dangerous realms of screaming near Mo Willems at one point. So Bob Sikoriak is friends with Mo Willems, and I met him. He and Kryota were talking to him at Mocha, and I didn't know what he looked like, so I walked over to them and was talking to Bob, and they're like, oh, and this is Mo, and who else is named Mo? Mo Rocca, I guess, but like, no.
Yeah, just a mobster from like a 1940s gangster movie, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think I turned to him and was like, what? And then the voice just hit that ceiling, like hit the ceiling and dinged the lamp, and his eyes got really big. I was like, bring it down. Bring it down, Andrea. And we just had a very nice conversation. He's a very gracious man about, he has a bunch of butcher paper he covers his dining room table with, and he and his family and guests will just draw on it, and they Instagram or like tweet pictures of it, and it's adorable and really fun. So we had a nice conversation about that, and then he left. And then I was really happy and smiley, and Bob and Kryota laughed at me in a wonderful way.
I will tell you without naming names, without naming the embarrassed person's name. I was once driving with a couple of cartoonists from a festival to get some dinner, and Pete Bagg was sitting in the back seat with these two younger cartoonists, and one of the younger cartoonists asked him, so what's your name?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm Pete. Oh, so why are you here? And he said, I make comics. And that was the moment where the cartoonist suddenly realized, oh my God, you're Pete Bagg. She completely freaked out. And it was just one of those. I'm sitting in the front seat with another older guy. We're both like, she doesn't know that's Pete. What is he going to do? Is he going to freak out on her?
He's trapped in a car. Yeah.
And she just melted down. And, I worship your comics. I just never met you before,
How did that, how long was his car ride? Was it?
Oh, it's just a few minutes.
Okay.
But it was just the funny thing of like we all piled in and my big Subaru, and everybody had to compress. And so who am I stuck up against? And then you realize
Oh my
that's
God.
the very reason you came to the festival. So
You know in Tintin when the character gets a gigantic exclamation point over their head? I feel like when I met Louis Trondheim, like I was just walking around with that. It was
yeah.
like, you're like wired.
Yeah, is his English any good?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I gotta learn French.
You could be like a Glennis Fawkes and go, study at Angoulême.
Yeah, it's a lovely town. Have you ever gone to the
Nope,
festival?
never gone. I feel like I oughta, but it's one of those things where I can justify going to TCAF and SPX and
Oh,
events like
France.
that. Pulling off France. I'm like, sort of have to tie that into some sort of business, I guess, or recording with Crumb, which I still hope to do at some point.
Or a vacation.
I don't know what that is exactly.
It would really be a working vacation in
Yeah.
all senses.
I've got a trade show in Barcelona. I could probably, if I ever see about tying that into.
Jesus Christ, yeah, you're already
Yeah.
over there.
I know.
Anyway.
But yeah, so you want to study French, move to Angoulême, and make comics for the rest of your life? Is that a...
I don't think that's possible, but I would love to do the residency. Glennis just
Yeah.
did it, and Matt and Jessica Abel have
Yeah.
just come back from a very extended one, and it would be we visited them 2 years ago, and saw I'm gonna screw this up, the Maison d'Auteur.
Yeah, I mispronounced it too, so it's okay because
Yeah.
we're Americans. It's all right.
It's the Maison d'Auteurs, yeah, which is lovely, and the library there was great. We got to see the archives. They have giant blow-ups of like Ben Catcher drawings on the walls. I mean, like where else do you go that's like this?
I'm with you.
And it's beautiful. So.
And that was, in fact, the vacation that I took in 2003 was New Zealand.
Oh.
And I went to New Zealand because I read Hicksville by Dylan Horrocks. And I know Hicksville doesn't really exist. There is no town where everybody's a little cartooning person in their own way. But I thought, if I'm going to go anywhere, I'm going to travel to the other side of the planet, go to New Zealand because
Wow.
Dylan did this comic. And he put me up for the first day or so before I was on a tour while I was down there. But I got into Auckland and stayed with Dylan and his girlfriend at the time, now wife, I think. And they're two very young kids who are now like college age, which freaks me out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was where comics will take you. Unfortunately, the other side of the planet. That's if you're lucky.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Did you see any crazy animals?
Yeah, I saw an Angora rabbit get shaved. I've got pictures too.
Oh, okay.
I was in a glowworm cave. They're glowworms. You can't take pictures because the
Right.
light screws up their ecosystem. And I saw Australians drinking, and that's of the most bizarre animals I met down there. That was probably it. I bungee jumped. I jet boated through river canyons. I took my first helicopter ride over a rainforest onto a glacier.
Dude, you're really good at vacations.
I crammed all that shit into 2 weeks back in 2003, and I never had to go anywhere again.
Oh,
It's
no.
fantastic, and I got the comics thing out of it.
Right, you did it all at once.
Yeah,
Oh.
but no, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. But I was also single, no dog, and I actually tried to pull that trip off without telling my family I was going anywhere. What was great was it was Thanksgiving week and the week after, and my old man said, "Yeah, I need a ride on Thanksgiving." He sounds nothing like that. I need a ride on Thanksgiving. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to be away." Oh, okay. And that was it.
Okay.
Didn't think to ask. My mother, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Oh, I'm going away. Where are you going? She actually cared enough, Jewish
Right.
mother, to ask, where I'm going or what I'm doing.
Right.
But otherwise, my original plan was just go and send postcards from the other side of the planet and come back in 2 weeks because I had no responsibilities of any kind outside of day job stuff. Then I got home and discovered the furnace had died in my house sometime in the intervening 2
Oof.
weeks. Yeah, that was entertaining. So, because it was December at that point. So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But anyway, and that's why I never leave the house again.
Okay.
But yeah, go to the other side of the world. Go somewhere where nobody knows who you are, but there's still a comics connection. That's
And that's a lot of places now, which
Yeah.
is fun
Isn't
and
it?
exciting, right?
So what are you doing? What's your next comics project?
I don't know. I want to get into just making comics journalism pieces.
Yeah.
I have some ideas about dog stories I want to develop into a zine. I am sketchbooking as usual, and a lot of ideas come out of that. So we'll see where that goes after it. But I don't have anything formal planned
Yeah.
next. But I probably have maybe 3 or 4 projects that once I have time for it, I think we'll start trying to roll out or plan over the course of 2017 into 2018. But yeah, nothing I can really like flag or underline right now, but you know, the interests continue, and it's nice to work on short work for that reason, because then you can accumulate it and build on it over time, you know, and, you know, work on a variety of topics. So
Cool. And what's it like teaching?
It's really, it's like a full body experience.
Yeah. Did you feel you were unqualified at first, or was it no, I can do this? Or
No, I felt like I was qualified, but I was also terrified of it, because I've been, in some way or another, I've been leading workshops since I was 12, or because I worked in a nature center, and then I was a camp counselor, and then I worked at the museum, and, you know, all this stuff. So that's fine. However, I also have like some of the best possible student setup that you could. I have students who are extremely motivated to be there and extremely knowledgeable and excited to learn. I mean, what else could you want? You know, that bar
yeah, there's
has
no
been
one
cleared.
just there filling a requirement or anything.
Right. Yeah. I really find the challenge of teaching very interesting, but again, I overthink things. So, and I'm very anxious about my ability to figure it out. Like, how do you crit? How do you independently crit? How do you motivate 15 different people with very different backgrounds how to do it? And I talked to, we were talking about over preparing. When I first got this job, I basically interviewed 8 of my teachers before I started teaching. I'd be like, well, what do you think about this? And how do you do this? And they're all wonderful teachers, and they've all like learned this over time. So they were very helpful in figuring this out. And a lot of it is just figuring it out on the go too.
Yeah, were they laughing behind your back? Like, yeah, she thinks this is going to help. That's.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like embracing chaos, right? Like, you set yourself up to succeed, but you have to admit there's a lot of it that you can't plan ahead of time. So, you know, like knowing how to manage the classroom and schedule things and have something in your back pocket and all that. But I'm always learning. I'm screwing up, and also having nice moments of breakthrough. But I really want to help, and is, I guess, tying into what we were talking about in the beginning. Like, I really want to help these people because I totally identify with where they are in their lives. You know, that's where I was, of really wanting to do something and not knowing if you can do it, and trying to figure it out, trying to figure out the money, and try to figure out the industry and the storytelling techniques. And there's just so much, and you can't do that all in a month. But it's a very valuable, meaningful process. But again, full body experience, like on your feet. So, have you ever taught?
I taught GED skills to highway workers in Maryland.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess it was in its way. I had a bunch of guys who were GED prospects, and then 3 guys who were illiterate.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah. Also, there was a racial split where the 3 illiterate guys were white, but all the GED guys were black, and that led to, despite the fact that they were far more ignorant than the black people, much more resentment in the class. It was pretty amazing for a 23, 24-year-old Gil to experience.
Oh, you were that young. Okay.
Yeah, it still worked out okay. It was actually one of the most rewarding moments of my life was when I got a guy into a program. Basically, he had to pass a math test, 20-question test. I think he had to get 12 right. And I over-prepared out the wazoo with this guy, and he came in after taking it and was mad at me because he got 18 right, and he only needed to get 12 right. And I was ready to kiss him, basically. I was like, oh, my God, you passed, Stainton. That's the greatest thing ever.
Oh, that's great.
I figured at that point teaching was never going to get any better for me, so I just never did it again. That was, I still figure, my real approach in life is just, peak experience. Don't bother replicating. I kid. But, yeah, it was pretty neat. But, yeah, I never went into any sort of academic situation. My brother's a teacher, so I think maybe there's some degree of he's got that part of it covered.
All right.
I've got the trade magazine lobbyist part covered, I guess.
An unusual niche.
Yeah, but I've managed to carve a career out of it. So
yeah,
it was career by attrition, which was a great thing. That really worked for me in the magazine side. People kept quitting ahead of me, and you just kept finding ways to move up. Yeah, it was a weird life, and then I realized someday they were waiting for me to quit, and that's when I
much like House of Cards.
I haven't watched it. I tell people that on the government relations side that the 2 directions my life could take when I was going into lobbying was either House of Cards, where I essentially get shivved by someone half my age who knew the game better than I did, or Breaking Bad, where it turns out that I'm actually evil and we just didn't realize it until you put me into the right situation. I'm going for a third way. I'm sort of hoping it's more like...
May I suggest the Great British Baking Show? I mean, they seem very peaceful.
well, I was going with Thick of It, or where it turns out that I just curse at everybody all the time and berate them, and everybody just gets out of my way. So I'm hoping that's where things sort of, as my Peter Capaldi book, that's where I'm really cultivating. So,
well, how's your Scottish accent?
That I have to work on.
Okay.
You know, I did it once in a monologue I did for the show back when I cared about doing my own creative output on this, as opposed to just talking to other people. I'm talking with you right now, not talking at you. Trust me. And I realized, I couldn't really do an accent with any consistency, much less any authenticity, I suppose. But anyway, that's me and my life.
Okay.
But to get back to the original point I made about this, about your first book, there's a progression, and how much of the structure of the book did you keep in terms of chronology, or did you structure it in a sense that it shows you kind of on a creative arc, or did you work on it more thematically when you were assembling the comics themselves?
I was kind of when I was talking with Matt Moses of Pick and Hock about making.
We should also talk about what's it like having a publisher.
Well, I guess it varies with publisher, but Matt is fantastic. He's excellent to work with. So when I was talking with him about the book, it was just a loose collection of ideas. I think I literally was like, I want to do something about poodles, and I want to do something about food and history, and he was totally cool with it. And like, yeah, sure, that
cake versus pie.
Yeah. So I was just trying to I knew the page count. And I was trying to make material, and I was looking at older material and seeing if I could adapt it or redo it. Like Peep of Day, I completely redid from an earlier version. And then I was trying to make new material going forward. And I need 2 pages, and I really wanted to do something about ramen. So I did that, and there was a bunch of ideas that had been on the back burner that have always, it's hard to finish projects, especially when you're busy and you're working and you're teaching and everything. Unless you have a place to put it and somebody who's expecting to find it there. So making comics for cons, having comics deadlines, I finally got to reach into my, folder and take out, or post-it note and take out the 3 projects I really wanted to work on and be like, okay, now is the time to do that thing about villages. What the hell am I going to do? But yeah, there's stuff that's older, as you pointed out. And then, I think when I was putting it together, Hometown was the last thing I did. And I started thinking let's spread out the big pieces, and Hometown can't begin it because it's like an ending piece. Yeah. So that should be
showstopper sort of thing.
Or it's about leaving too, so that's also a good way to leave. And it's hard to follow that with Ghost Bra. So so it made a certain kind of sense. And early on, me and Matt and I talked about the title, and the best way I could encapsulate all these different really different things was just this is how I see the world. So why would you do that? Is a fairly good, accurate title. And people kept coming up to the table and being like, why would you do that?
With the wonderful illustration of
ice cream.
Fighting ice cream.
Yeah, fighting food. It's fun.
Yeah, do you find a particular set of topics or subjects that you just gravitate to again and again? I mean, you got the food jokes, but you don't want to become the Jim Gaffigan of cartooning. Or do you?
I don't know. I mean, I like, and styles I use change too, depending on what I'm doing. I just get interested in different things, and I always follow what I'm interested in or what my curiosity is. So food is interesting. Interestingly,
food is interesting to represent, or interesting to write about? What grabs you? Are you able to?
If I can't use the word interesting one more time,
it's such an interesting book.
It's a fascinating study. No, I'm not a foodie at all. But I am.
Those are shitty ice cream cones.
Hey, there's only so far your ice cream's gonna go, right? Yeah. Unless you're getting the fancy goat cheese stuff. But I love other people's obsessions about food. I love watching Kings of Pastry and seeing 2 men carefully bisecting a pastry and sharing it, like a petit four, and sharing it. And it's probably amazing. And they've got this most serious look on their face of just crunch, crunch, it's not good enough. And, like the little human, and food is so fascinating because it's so literally visceral. And it's so, vulnerable. It's like eating is such a vulnerable moment in your life, that I find that as like a good conduit to examining other things about people. I'm getting off topic. Things that I find interesting. Again, just like my weird interests in stuff, they tend to follow things that I find funny, things that I find highly contradictory, or just whatever's going on in my life. I mean, I was leaving, in the middle of packing up to leave New York, and thinking about villages and home, because, Kush, Kush, it's a Latvian comics anthology, which is really cool. They make these like kind of sandwich-sized little books on different topics, and they put out open calls, and they go to TCAF and everything, and they had put one out for villages, and I grew up in a village. So I was thinking about it, and then I missed the deadline, of course. So that was going on, and I was leaving, and so that kind of combined into doing something about a ghost town and hometown. So it all kind of combines and comes out in the wash, I guess, would be my non-answer.
Which is my terrible way of asking, of course. So where do you get your ideas? Which is the thing I hate asking people, and I always find some circuitous way to realize, oh shit, I just asked that. That's
Well, that's what's nice about reading other people's comics, though, because it shows you so much about the way they think, right? Or especially humor, because what someone finds funny and how they find it funny really shows your psychology.
No, trust me, I just posted an episode with M.K. Brown, who, if you don't know her work, you really
should.
You would benefit greatly
Cool.
from. And I think her blurb for it was, I draw things that I don't understand so that others won't understand them either. And like in my introduction,
That's
I'm like,
good.
I have no way of conveying how absolutely surreal and bizarre this woman's comics are, but they are absolutely amazing. But still, just on another planet, which I was exposed to at far too young an age when I was reading National Lampoon when I was like 8 years old.
Okay.
And such.
That's... Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing when I interviewed Sam Gross. It was, I saw your comics when I was like 5, and that's really kind of wrong. It's like, that's probably,
I think Edward Gorey was upset when someone said, like, oh, yeah, I love the Curious Sofa? A pornographic tale? Like, my kid loves it.
Although, as it turns out, when I was at the Ghostbusters movie this weekend, there was a trailer for the Batman animated series. They're adapting this horrifically sexually violent Batman comic from the 80s done by Alan Moore called The Killing Joke.
Oh, yeah.
In the kids' Batman style.
No.
Making it rated R. It's literally rated R, and they're going to show it in theaters and sell it on Blu-ray, but it's going to look just like a regular Batman cartoon, but
Right.
involve Joker raping a girl and taking, and it was one of those moments of like, I'm not sure you understand exactly what terrible things you're committing while doing this, but that's me and my fact that I don't have kids and therefore don't have to worry about what they see and don't see, but there's still a that's something that's probably going to lead to some really horrible.
I don't know if I want to see that, honestly, but
When it was it would have been a little bit before you'd gotten to comics. There was a degree that not just the grim and gritty thing, but like the
ultraviolence.
And what it meant, and this idea that heroes were somehow just villains having a good day, or vice versa.
Right.
That really turned out to be kind of a dead end to take things down, but they kept hammering away at it for the next couple of decades. So, like the fact that Alan Moore disowned that project and said he's embarrassed to have done it and it was terrible and shouldn't have been done. Nonetheless, didn't stop Warner Brothers from deciding, let's make it a kids cartoon and rated R, and show it in movie theaters. So comics are terrible. That's really get out. Just get out now. That's.
But then you have Lumberjanes and the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl and like lots of Ms. Marvel, Camilla Khan, I guess, and the new Thor and all kinds of, and Kate Beaton and all kinds of really exciting things that are happening right now too. I probably would be okay if I never read another Batman comic in my life, and I love Batman. He's the world's best detective. But
Do you have any vibe whatsoever about working for a mainstream comics company?
like DC or Marvel?
Yeah.
I don't see why they would ever hire me. I'm not.
Did you have any aspiration for that?
No. Ever.
Because that used to be the thing. Like Dan Clowes starting out.
Oh, he really wanted to.
Well, I don't know if
do
you
that.
ever saw his first comic before 8 Ball was called Lloyd Llewellyn.
No.
With all these L's. It was this weird, like, 1962 hip detective comic. Weird, and you could see the threads of what he would do subsequently coming out of it. but all the L's for Lloyd Llewellyn was a Superman joke because of Lois Lane, Lana Lang, all that stuff. And he that was the
Nice.
career path, was to do some
Right.
indie work and then, go write Wonder Woman or draw the Jimmy Olsen comic or something. And that was,
No,
Yeah.
my ambition was to find a small place to hide away in and make Edward Gorey type books, or make picture books, make books. And I never really felt like drawing someone else's character either. A, it wouldn't be mine financially, it wouldn't be mine, and B, I just feels weird.
yeah.
It's hard enough expressing my own weirdness in weird stories. It would be weird. It would be interesting. It would be a challenge I wouldn't feel like accepting to do that for somebody else, unless it was the right project. Again, like the Little Nemo adaptation that Locust Moon did was fun and was the big one that can
Right,
crush
that
you.
giant sized.
Yeah, and that was great. Because it's not just adapting the character, really. It's much more. I mean, that
More
thing
of a
is
tribute, also.
right.
Yeah.
Right, and it's Little Nemo is much more about the form than it is about that character.
Yeah.
Because he's like a cipher. But so that was fun. But I don't know if I would do it for. Like, what the hell would my Batman be?
Well, that's the thing I wondered about, having come up of a certain age where that was what the goal was, what it's
Right.
like coming up in a world where comics doesn't equal working for the big two.
Well, I was coming up at a time that web comics were starting to become a very big thing. So that was something that I thought about, but I'm just not, my production schedule doesn't fit it.
Yeah.
And I think the stuff that I make doesn't necessarily suit it either. It's not serialized fiction. But in other ways, like, comic journalism are fitting into things like BuzzFeed and the Nib and stuff like that. So it can appear in that, but I never cracked that nut, basically. But do you read any webcomics?
No. I literally, Tom Spurgeon turned me on to Kate Beaton's stuff, and I thought, wow, she's really
Yes.
good. This is some neat stuff. And then I went to TCAF where she was appearing. And I thought she was appearing next to David Boswell, the guy who did Reed Fleming, World's Toughest Milkman, another great comic that I'll turn you on to later.
Okay, thank you.
And there was this enormous line downstairs. I'm like, who the hell? Everybody's here to see David Boswell. And then I realized Boswell's table has like 3 people online. And there's like 200 people online for Kate. I had no idea she had that following. This is a few years ago. But no idea that any web cartoonist had that level of fandom. People were coming with, cookies for her. They knit
nice.
dolls and things. And I just had no grasp until that moment that there was such a devoted fan base for web-based stuff.
Yeah.
And she's, gone on to make print comics subsequently, or, book or anthologies of her stuff. But yeah, that was my moment of, okay, I'm totally missing out on an entire form of comics. I'm officially, passe now. So, it's fine. It's again, you have to curate what's,
Right.
because none of us have all the time in the world to follow all this stuff.
Right.
So are you happy?
I'm healthier than I've been before.
Yeah.
I'm content and grateful. So that's good.
I take that as a plus and a
Yeah.
good note for us. Andrea Tsurumi, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memories Show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been delightful talking with you.
And that was Andrea Tsurumi. Go pick up her new comic collection, Why Would You Do That? From Hick and Hawk Publishing. It's at comic shops and weirder bookstores. Also, visit Andrea's site, andreatsurumi.com, and check out her comics, blog, commercial illustration, children's books, CV, links to other interviews she's done, although none of them are as great as mine, and more. Why Would You Do That? As I mentioned, I hope I conveyed over the course of the conversation, is a hoot. It's really strange humor, and her art complements her strangeness very, very well. AndreaTsurumi.com is AndreaTsurumi. So Tsurumi, starting with a T. Anyway, after the main conversation, I asked Andrea, so, who you reading? And if you want to hear her answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show, including that podcast, patron-only blog, series of ebooks, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. And if you don't like Patreon, please go to paypal.me/VMSpod and make a donation that way. If you do, you'll get access to the same material through fearofasquareplanet.com. A special thanks go out to show supporters Paul W. Jones, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Zach Martin, Kyle Peterson, and Ron Slate for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. We got the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. This episode was recorded at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, right after last week's show with Arthur Lubau in the West Village. So the two episodes combined cost me about $12 at the George Washington Bridge, another $30 for parking, $6 for the subway, and, of course, coffee. If you want to help defray some of my costs, visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a donation. And I want to thank again Nathan Fox and Joan McCabe at the School of Visual Arts for helping me find a space to record this episode as well as next week's show, which we haven't done yet, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it works out. You can find out more about SVA by visiting sva.edu. Nathan chairs the MFA Visual Narrative Department, and Joan is the Director of Operations for that department. Now, our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David has a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David. You can find out more and support that at facebook.com/davidanddavidmusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories show. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with a conversation with the cartoonist Leslie Stein. We haven't recorded yet, so don't hold it against me if it turns out to be someone else in next week's slot. Until next time, you can subscribe to the show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories show on Twitter at VMSpod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. Until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.